So much said, I'm in too deep. Waters I tread can't catch my breath. A shadow chasing me, a game of hide and seek. If I'll never have a peace. All right, welcome everyone to another edition of Deconversion Stories. I don't know, I haven't mentioned this in a while. If you guys do like the intro music, that is me singing. That is my band. So there are links to the music for the intro and the outro for both this show and the after party, always in the description box. And of course, today my very special guest is Dr. Darrel Ray, who is the founder of Recovering from Religion and also the Secular Therapy. And you are also an author. You've done the God Virus, I think, and the other one, I can't remember the title, but it's something to do with sex.
Sex and God.
That's what it was, sex and God.
Yeah, in that order. You always put sex first, God second. Yeah.
Well, doesn't the God part usually come during sex?
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah, that does happen.
Oh, God.
On regular occasions.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, Dr. Darrel, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. You know, Neil, I don't think I've ever been on your show, have I?
I do not think so. And I've been meaning to ask you for a long time, but I just never got around to it until
we finally made it.
Yeah. Well, we both were, of course, the fundraiser for Recovering for Religion.
Yeah,
that
right.
Ethan threw together, which was fantastic.
Yep. Yeah, we raised around a little over $13,000.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we didn't quite hit 10 during the show. I think we were like 9, 8, something like that. But then after the show, we got a lot more. Anyway, it was just thrilling to exceed our goal. We love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think he set a ceiling of 10, I believe, for the show.
Well, yeah, the year before we'd set we'd asked 5,000 and we blew it past that to 8,000. So I talked Ethan into letting us go to 10 and he was scared shitless. He didn't think that was a good idea, but he went along with it and we made it. We blew past it. So
unreal.
Thank Ethan for trusting us, trust me.
Sound like a car salesman. We do have a couple of links that were thrown into the chats for on Twitch and YouTube here for the God Virus book, and I believe you'll be chucking the other one in there as well, Mikey. And also, if you would like to follow Dr. Ray around on the interwebs, I've got a bunch of links. You can follow him around with like your Twitter, your Facebook, your Spreaker, and also I had doubled up the links for Recovering for Religion and the Secular Therapy Project.
Great, thank you.
So you can find them all down below, as the little ticker says. But Dr. Ray, what I do here is I chat with folks about their journeys away from whatever faith systems they're once a part of, and I like to talk about kind of how those dominoes started falling and what led you into becoming the let's face it, atheist activist that you are today.
Well, I'll just tell you this. I was talking to my partner before I got on the show, and I said, I think my story is about the least interesting story I've ever heard, almost. And most of the clients that come to Recover from Religion have stories that are far more interesting than mine. But I'm happy to share mine because I think there are elements that might be of interest to people. But
sure, yeah.
Basically, I'm almost embarrassed. I'm sure most of the people you've had on here have much more interesting stories than I will. So there you go.
I had Dillahunty on here, and he didn't even want to talk about that. So because he's told it so many times, so we decided to talk about building a better community.
Oh, okay.
Which, part and parcel, sort of.
Sure. Well, I've heard Matt's story, and his is a good story. It's better than mine, even. I mean, of course, this is all my opinion. I could be wrong. I've only been wrong once or twice in my life, so that's a possibility.
Where
do you want to
rule it out?
Where do you want to start?
Well, that's up to you. You sort of take us back to the beginnings when you were, indoctrinated and involved, and how you found your way out of it.
Well, I was indoctrinated. Everybody in my family was religious. My grandparents were preachers and elders. My grandfather was a country church preacher for 45 years. My dad was an elder. My other grandfather was an elder. My parents were very religious, so religious that they actually became missionaries when they retired. Wow. So, of course, I was much older than they actually became missionaries, but still, that's how dedicated they were. However, my my parents, it was a conservative. I would classify it as a conservative Christian, not fundamentalist, but elements of fundamentalism. But there wasn't
like,
a lot
were
of
they Bible believers kind of thing. Like, did they think it was the inerrant word? That sort
no, they kind of paid lip service to that, and they were somewhat creationists. But I'll look mainly at my mother. She was pretty open-minded and liberal for a pretty conservative Christian family,
That's all right.
And I was always science-based and interested in science. I remember 8th grade biology just blew my mind. And I went up to my 8th grade biology teacher one day to ask him something about evolution. And he looked like I was the devil incarnate or Satan or something. I don't know. I got a look from him, and he says, and he hesitated. I mean, it's like it happened yesterday. I can see his face. He hesitated. He says, I can't talk about that in this class. And I got I got the distinct feeling at that moment was he loved evolution. He mentioned it or mentioned things around it all the time, but he couldn't talk about it because he didn't want to get a bunch of parents down his throat. Because, we lived in a fairly conservative religious. But, man, that kind of response got me really curious about evolution at that point in time. So I was all my life, I've just been a person. If I get interested in something, I go read every book I can find on it. Sure. And I become like a mini expert in that particular area. So needless to say, within 6 weeks, I was kind of an expert on evolution, regardless of what my environment. My mother and my grandfather once told me that evolution was a lie. So I had that influence. And one day I was 12 years old, and we'd gone down to visit my aunt and uncle, who were federal employees on the Navajo Indian Reservation down by Gallup, New Mexico. Now, remember, they're federal employees, and they were teaching in a BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs school. And they thought their attitude was the federal government is paying us to convert these Navajo Indians to Christianity. So that was their attitude. I mean, even then I knew that was wrong, but 12 years old, you don't ask too many questions. So I go up to the top of the mesa behind their house. There was a 500-foot mesa above the house, behind the house. And my brother and I went up there, and we're looking around the top of this mesa, and we're finding, if we'd stayed long enough, we could have found hundreds of shark's teeth. As it was, we probably found 30 or 40 shark's teeth in just a very short time. Neat. We came back down. I had a vial full of these shark's teeth, and I show them to my mom and my aunt Margie at the time. And I say, well, Aunt Margie, where'd these shark's teeth come from? And she said with a straight face that God put them there in the flood. So at that moment, I knew I had another word in my head. You ladies did not know what you're talking about. Yeah, so I wasn't convinced from very early on. So when people tell their coming out stories from religion, I think, I never believed that shit. It just never clicked with me.
Right.
But here's the deal, Neil. I wanted to help people. I've always had a passion for making up people's lives better. And so I decided, I didn't believe in the mythology. I didn't believe in the Bible. I read the Bible. I won Bible. What was it called? They had this contest every year to be the best at answering Bible questions. Bible Bowl. That's what it was, a Bible Bowl. And it was kind of a takeoff of the
Bible Bowl.
Yeah, it was called the Bible Bowl. And it was a takeoff of one of the TV shows, a quiz show about knowledge. Ask a question, you got the right answer. One of those early, and they just stole that idea and made a Bible Bowl out of it. I won Bible Bowl, so I knew my Bible pretty damn well. I didn't believe it, but I knew it.
I did too.
Yeah. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I was raised Jewish, so I knew everything Old Testament and whatnot.
You
right?
probably knew more than I did about the Old Testament.
Well, it's hammered into us. We had to go for years. We had to go to Hebrew school, and they teach you all that stuff, right? So.
Yep, we didn't have that. I mean, it was just Wednesday night and Sunday. But we were in we were in the church 3 to 4 times a week. So we were really involved. Yeah. Bible studies and prayer studies and choir. I loved singing. So I was in the choir. I was a tenor soloist many times. I even got paid to be a tenor soloist for a while. And later, many years later. But anyway, I was a pretty good singer. And where did I leave off? Oh yeah. So I'm just not interested as much in the religion as I am in helping people. And my path to helping people, I thought, was through religion. I got it under my undergraduate was in anthropology and sociology. But I also, you had to take some religion courses at the college I went to, Friends University.
Oh yeah.
And, we had to take one New Testament course, or one Old Testament course and one New Testament course, and then an elective, and then one other elective in religion. Well, I chose an elective. I thought the Old Testament course was totally boring because I knew the archaeology was terribly bad. It was wrong. I mean, the guy is sitting up there telling me shit that I know I can go down here, the library, and find. You're telling me shit that never happened. Like the Israeli Exodus from Egypt.
Right?
Yeah, stuff like that. I knew that was all bullshit.
The walls of Jericho, the Babylon Tower.
Oh yeah, all that stuff. So I took a course on the Synoptic Gospels. Now I'm pretty sure a lot of the people watching this show don't know what the Synoptic Gospels are, and I didn't know it. At the ripe old age of 19 years old, a sophomore in college, I'm taking the Synoptic Gospels. I may have been a junior. I'm not remembering. Sure. I was blown away by the comparisons of the three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Those are called the Synoptic Gospels. That whole course opened my mind to a whole new way of understanding the Bible and critiquing the Bible. And the irony of it all is we had a very pious instructor who was a Church of Christ minister, and he was a really good instructor. And so as a result of that course, I got introduced to early Christian critiques or commentaries on the Bible and religion. I got introduced to Origen and to Tullian and Eusebius and all these early church fathers that were writing in the 2nd century. I mean, like writing around 125 CE. And again, mind blowing when you start reading these things and realize that was a whole version of Christianity that was precursor to what eventually became the Catholic Church. And he's had a lot of crazy, can I use the 4-letter words frequently?
Oh yeah, it's a free-for-all on this show.
Okay, well, I just had no idea how fucked up Christianity was from the very beginning. I mean, Tertullian was the most misogynistic asshole I've ever read. I mean, you go out and find a Nazi here now today, and you won't find anybody who's more of an asshole than Tertullian was. And yet, he is a saint of the Catholic Church, and he is.
I never figured out why.
A pillar of the theology of the Catholic Church, even though he left the Catholic Church. He left anyway, I could go on and on about this shit. So that's where I was going. And I went off. Vietnam War was big at that time. And I was ready. I had a draft card. And I was subject to being drafted. And I went to Friends University. Well, Friends University is a Quaker school. And my uncle, Keith Parker was his name, he had been a conscientious objector in World War II. And my grandfather, Earl Parker, had been a conscientious objector in World War I. So I had two family members, a grandfather and an uncle, that were conscientious objectors in those two wars. And I'm 18 years old. I'm going to be drafted. And I told my mom and dad, I've read this Bible and I know what Jesus says. And Jesus says, he who lives by the sword is going to die by the sword. So I'm not going. And I'll go to Canada. I'll go up and visit Neil if I have to. Or I will not go to that war. I will go to jail if I have to, but I will go to Canada if I can. And that just tore my parents up. They did not. My dad had been in Air Force, you know.
Yeah.
He was Air Force in the time between World War II and Korea. He missed both wars. Barely. Literally barely missed it. If he'd have stayed in the Air Force, he got out early. If he'd have stayed in any longer, like just 2 or 3 months longer, he'd have been in Korea.
Right.
So, you know, it was close for him. But anyway, he was embarrassed. The whole family had been embarrassed because my uncle was a conscientious objector in World War II. You know, in World War II, if you were a CO, they drafted you. You're a non-combatant draftee, and they sent him off to California to fight forest fires. Oh. And the casualty rate among forest firefighters in California during the war was about equal to the casualty rate of a frontline combat soldier in Europe.
No kidding.
It was fucking dangerous. Well, think about it. Think of all the high-tech equipment we've got and the air support and, you know, all the things that we've got to fight forest fires now. All they had was a pick and a shovel. They didn't even have protective
buckets
gear.
Of water.
Yeah. They would go out there and they'd be cutting fire lines, you know, to keep the fire from spreading. And what we didn't know, or what he didn't know, of course, at the time, have you ever heard of the Japanese balloon barrage?
Yes. I've heard of it, but I'm not all that familiar with much of the details.
Yeah, the Japanese learned before we did. They learned that the jet stream went from roughly where Japan is over to where Oregon is. And if you float a balloon in the jet stream in northern Japan, it will probably end up somewhere around Oregon or northern California. So they were floating these incendiary bombs that would go over the Atlantic Ocean and then land and ignite when they dropped and start forest fires.
I think you mean Pacific.
Yeah, I'm sorry, from the Pacific. Yeah, right. So yeah,
that's a very long.
It is. It is, but you know, we get our weather from that direction. Yeah. You can see a storm coming 2 weeks away. So, you know, probably 2 weeks time to throw the balloon up and time the fire breaks out. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff he was doing. How'd I get off on that? And so I applied to be a conscientious objector for Vietnam. I go through the whole process. You have to write an essay. You have to go before a board. You got to answer a bunch of questions. And they treat you like shit. You know, you're a coward because you don't want to go to Vietnam. And I wasn't a coward. I knew how to shoot a gun. I'd shot it my whole life. I just wasn't going to shoot somebody that hadn't offended or hurt the United States. I was very much against that. Anyway, so I ended up having conscientious objector status through all my college time. And that gave me the opportunity to apply to seminary. I went to seminary. Neil, I know you're probably surprised by this, but I got a 2-year degree at Scarrett College for Christian Workers.
You've spoken about it before, actually, on one of the shows I think I've seen you on. So I know.
Oh, did I? Oh, okay. Well, then you did know it.
Alert.
It's a while ago, mind you.
Are we going where you wanted? I mean, I.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All of this is it's all part and parcel. So for sure.
Okay. All right. So I go to Scarrett College for Christian Workers, and the interesting thing is I'd hardly met a gay person in my whole life until I went to seminary. Mm-hmm. And it took me about 2 weeks to realize that about half the kids at the seminary were gay.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, you know, I'd met a lot of gay people in my life. I just didn't know it, you know.
Sure.
I was raised in a homophobic bubble in my Christian environment.
Well, that's why I'm surprised that you say that there were so many of them that were gay at the seminary.
It was like a magnet. I mean, in my experience, many of the choir directors and music directors and youth directors of most of the churches I ever was involved in turned out to be gay. Wow. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but I can't tell. I mean, there hardly is a music director of a church, hardly any church I've been involved with, the music director wasn't gay. It just, they just seemed to fit into that role really well. Yep. And a lot of youth directors, youth group directors were gay. So they're just, that blew my mind that here I am in this Scarrett College for Christian Workers, and homophobia is everywhere except right in this little campus. And I'm getting hit on all the time by gay guys. And I don't know what to do with that.
Bravo, sir.
Now I am married, and, I've always been straight, but this was really quite an eye-opening education for me. It really opened my scope of understanding about the real world, and especially around sexuality. Because this school, even though it was a Methodist seminary, it was extremely liberal around sexuality. They even let a human sexuality group have a regular 3-day weekend retreat on the campus. And they showed, this was back in the days of 16 millimeter film. Okay. I'm showing my age here. It was 1973. And this group is showing pornography films to this human sexuality group on the campus. I never had the courage to go to one of those. I just knew it was happening. And so I'd always been wondering about human sexuality and religion always seemed to be at some kind of odds with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And since I was a little kid, it started masturbating. I thought, man, why is this wrong? It feels so damn good. And
that's why.
Yeah. So I
feel happy.
I would just say that about this time, I'm married. I'm sexually frustrated. I can't masturbate without feeling guilty. I'm being told sex is wrong and homosexual. I mean, all these messages.
Sure.
And it starts hitting me that religion has to capture your sexuality in order to control you.
Yep.
Which reminds me of a quote by Richard Nixon. I don't quote Richard Nixon very often, but he did have this quote: "If you've got them by the balls, their hearts and minds will follow." And that's the way. That's a joke, Neil. You're right. I'm wondering about you guys. Anyway, what religion do is it grabs you by your sexuality, and that allows it to control you. I didn't realize all this. Of course, I put this all together many years later. And after 2 years of being in this seminary, I realized this isn't for me. I don't believe most of this shit. So when I left, I was still a very liberal Christian. I still, believed in, Jesus is love and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to try and get away from it, but I'm married. I'm married to a woman that's pretty religious, although she's very tolerant and flexible, and she'll go to a liberal.
Flexible.
Yeah, she was that too. And she would let us go to a liberal church, and if one was available, and we did. It wasn't satisfying to her, and it really wasn't satisfying to me either, because I didn't even want to go to a liberal church. But that's the way it works when you get married.
Yeah.
And that went on for a number of years, and then we had kids, and kids really bring you back into the church environment, unfortunately. And she wasn't going to not go to church if we had kids. We have to raise those kids in some kind of church. So,
well, you don't, but okay.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know it. And the other question side is, not only was all of my family religious, but all of her family was even more religious. Her parents were true fundamentalists. I mean, so fundamentalist that when she wanted to go to college, they said, "We will only pay for you to go to one college, and that's Ozark Bible College." Which wasn't even a accredited university. You could get a degree there, and it was worth nothing. So she had to go there, or they wouldn't pay for it. She went there for one semester. I mean, this is a place where a girl cannot go out on a date on Saturday night unless she kneels down on the floor of the dorm, and her dress at least touches the ground. If it doesn't, she got to go back and put a different dress on because it's too short.
Wow.
They had a very strict dress code. Oh, and you got to be in by 10 o'clock, and there better not be any hanky panky or fooling around. It wasn't
so how
quite.
How do they test for that, though?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how they tested for it in a minute.
Snitches.
So anyway, all this bullshit. It's not quite a Bob Jones level. It's not nearly that bad, really. I shouldn't say that, but during that time, I was involved in this Christian groups and a lot of these kids went to that college. It was like the college for people who graduate, who went to the kinds of churches that I went to, independent Christian churches. And what I learned during that time, because she was there and a little bit later, was every semester half a dozen or girls or so would just disappear. They wouldn't come back to the next semester, and you never knew what happened to them. They just, they were having a good time all semester. They were making good grades. It seemed to like the school, and then poof, next semester, their dorm room has got somebody else in it. And I didn't know what was going on. It was a little bit suspicious. Why? Because I saw it happen too many times until it happened to a couple of people I had some connections to, and I found out they were pregnant. So they had gotten pregnant at school. They went to have the baby somewhere else, and then they probably went to another school too, or they went and got an abortion. I don't know. Wouldn't know. But wow, sexuality again, and the hypocrisy of all this came to my attention with some profound effect when I started seeing the sexual abuse by the ministers in my own church and by the professors at that university. My brother's 2 years younger than me. It was about 1976. I'd long since left home. I was in graduate school, and my brother is home, and he goes into the baptistry. Our denomination dunk people. You got to go all the way under, or you're not fully Christian. And so he went, and they had this dressing place back there and I know because I got baptized. You go back there, you strip naked, you put on this gown, and then you get dunked. Well, it's a very quiet place, and nobody ever goes back there unless they're getting baptized. Well, my brother is in the church doing something. I don't know why. I wasn't there. And he hears a noise in the baptistry. So he goes to investigate, and it's the head assistant pastor fucking the chairman of the board of elders' wife. And she was hot. I mean, really hot. So they were just going. I mean, everybody had the hots for that chairman of the board's wife. She was just really, really. I had the hots for her. Anyway, so all this happened.
There's some masturbation material for you right there.
Yeah, right. And within a 3-year time period, we had 8 different churches of our particular denomination in Wichita, Kansas, where I grew up. Within a 3-year time period, 8 different ministers out of 6 of those churches had affairs.
Wow.
Here's the deal.
Yep.
Not one of them got fired for the affair.
No, of course not.
The only one that got fired several years later when they caught him having actually it was his third affair. And he stole money. Now that's the real crime, stealing money.
How dare you?
Yeah. And these are ministers that would stand
not
up
and thou shalt not commit adultery bullshit, right?
Yeah. He would stand up and preach hours of sermons about adultery and that sort of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
So
you got to remember, stealing is higher up than the adultery anyway. So
evidently, but just all these little pieces when you don't believe to begin with that much, and then all these little pieces keep just drip, washing it all away. It gets pretty. The themes start becoming pretty clear, even to somebody like me. That So that led me to leave the seminary, and I still wanted to help people. So I got a job working in a juvenile
Oh, cool.
A juvenile treatment center, not detention center, juvenile treatment center,
Sure.
as a counselor. Well, I had never had a counseling course in my life. I went to seminary. I didn't go to psychology.
Right.
I'd only had one psychology course in my entire life, and here I am, a counselor in a state institution. But I caught the bug. I thought, dang, I like this. I started reading all, me. I find every book I can. I read all the books, and I'm starting to
behind you.
Yeah, they are actually. There's quite a few of them back there that I still had from college, and I read them all. And I'm educating myself on how to be a counselor, which led me to go back to school and begin my doctoral work at Vanderbilt, Peabody College of Vanderbilt University. And I was still going to church more because my wife wanted to, but I would say at this point in time, I'm about as close to being I'm a liberal Christian, but I'm really that close to being agnostic. But I hung with it. I had 2 kids by that time. Moved back to Kansas, where I am now, to take a job as the chief psychologist of another juvenile institution. And we're going to these liberal churches, and I'm singing in the choir. I really enjoy it. I really enjoyed singing in the choir. But I went to this Presbyterian church in Leavenworth. It was pretty liberal, but they were so desperate that they would let me preach. And they would let me, and I would teach Sunday school. And they couldn't find anybody to teach adult Sunday school.
No,
so when I volunteered, oh, well, he's got a doctorate in psychology. Maybe he can talk about something interesting.
Well, hang on, Dr. Ray. If you're teaching the Sunday school and you're not really quite the believer, how did that work with you, like personally? Like, was there like some dissonance going on there? Or?
Oh, none whatsoever, because I felt like the fox in the hen house. Because frankly, I loved these people in this church. They were good people.
Okay.
They were poorly educated about their own fucking religion. They didn't know. Yeah. They didn't know shit. It's a Presbyterian church, and they don't even know what Calvinism is. Oh, geez. So I mean, that's what was going on there. Plus, they had made a series of bad decisions in hiring their ministers. They hired a child sex abusing minister.
Oh boy.
And they hired him when the denomination already knew. Of course, the denomination didn't tell him, but he was a known sex offender. They hired a couple other. Anyway, between these 2 ministers getting fired at different times, they needed somebody to preach. So I'd stand up and preach, once a month or something. I could preach a whole sermon without mentioning Jesus once. Because it was a humanistic sermon. And then when I started teaching Sunday school, they would have 5 people show up to these Sunday school classes before I started them. Within a week or 2 after I started a Sunday school class, I would announce the subject. We're going to do comparative religions. We're going to do the psychology of religion. Interesting topics. I would have standing room only. They had to move my Sunday school class twice to give me bigger spaces.
Wow.
Because the old space was just big enough for a half a dozen people. So I was bringing more people into their church than they'd ever seen before.
Must have blown them away.
And I was giving them lectures on here's Hinduism, and I was bringing in a Sikh to lecture to them about what Sikhism, and I brought the Iranian Zoroastrian. A person who had experience in Zoroastrian. He wasn't Zoroastrian himself.
I studied that stuff a long time back. Yeah.
And I brought a Baha'i in. A good friend of mine he wasn't Baha'i. He was an atheist himself, but he had grown up in a family of Baha'is. So he knew a lot about Baha'is. Anyway, these people just lap this stuff up. Mm-hmm. And I didn't sit there and say, hey, there ain't no such thing as the God you worship. I just educated them. They can come to their own conclusions. That's always been my MO I don't believe in arguing with people. I'll let them come to their own conclusions after they've done their own research. But anyway, so that led me out of that was fun. But once I got divorced in 1988, and I never looked back. I'd been an atheist for years, probably 3 or 4 years before then, and getting out was the most liberating. That is the thing that really liberated me from religion, was getting divorced.
Really?
I'm still friends with my spouse. We had a probably as good a divorce as you could have, and we finished raising our kids. So, we're successful. We had 2 good kids. So I was pleased about that. But, she went her way, I went mine. She still attends Village Presbyterian Church here in Kansas City, and it is probably the second most liberal church in the whole city. So she's still very liberal, very open-minded, that sort of stuff.
What about your kids? Are they do they follow the church at all, or do they?
Oh, hell no. Not my son. My son won't call himself an atheist because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to look like he's following his dad. It's that. I wouldn't want to look like my dad. But he's into some
like non-believer, that kind of thing.
He's a non-believer that believes in some woo-woo stuff. I don't know.
Okay.
He's hard to pin down. And I don't keep track of that stuff. It doesn't. It's not relevant to our
whatever he's into, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And he's a big biker guy. He's a mechanic. He likes working with his hands. He's got his own business. There's nothing religious there.
Did you introduce him to Aaron Ra?
No, I don't think he and Aaron would get along too well. I don't know. my son goes to his own a beat of his own drummer. So anyway,
Okay.
But my daughter is on the other side. I did not raise her. We raised her. We raised our kid liberal religious, and she has become a fucking Baptist, which I'm sorry to say.
Boy.
Now she's not rabid or radical, and she and I literally we have a really good, loving, caring relationship. So
that's fantastic. It
has not interfered with that, but we have a very clear understanding. We don't talk about religion, and we don't talk about sex. So, we talk about grandkids. We talk about the Kansas University winning the national championship last night.
Well, that's right. They did too.
KU basketball team won in my lifetime. They've won it 3 times, the national championship. It's pretty exciting when you're.
Can't say the same for my hockey team.
And KU is just 25 miles from my house, so we get a lot of energy from there. Anyway,
I think you told me you didn't think your story was very exciting. I thought there's some great parts to that.
Well, so far. All right. Well,
the reason I do these is because somebody might find them useful, right? And I've actually gotten many emails because I've done almost 400 interviews, and I've gotten many emails from people saying, thanking me for what I'm doing here, because there's not a lot of it going on. I mean, there's some channels that do it once in a while, but to have a channel dedicated to it, apparently I didn't realize this, but apparently I'm one of the few. So they very much thank me because they learn a lot about, because sometimes I've even had emails from somebody that said they never knew that there were other non-believers.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a definite place for what we're doing right now. I really do.
For sure.
And I do think that some parts of my story are worth talking about, but I'm not trying to be too modest here. I like talking about it, of course.
Yeah.
I guess what I said early on was, I think the trauma that I see in so many people,
yes,
as they tell their story, and as a psychologist, it just pains me to see people dealing with that trauma. And I did not experience trauma. Religion was never traumatic to me, and I think largely because I didn't take it seriously. The worst thing that probably happened to me was 12 years old. My mom comes into my bedroom when I'm masturbating and catches me. And
I think we've all been there.
But she sat down next to the bed and patted me on the shoulder and said, "That's okay, Darrell. You won't do it when you get married." And she was half right.
Wife's away. Paula Henderson will play.
But I did. That kind of tells you my mother was. She'd been dead about 10 years, but she was remarkably open-minded and sexual, and somewhat openly sexual, even as a religionist. And she would, at the age of 12, 13, I was asking all sorts of questions about sex. As you might have imagined, I've always been interested in sex. From a personal study and a professional study.
Right.
Yeah. So she finally got tired of hearing all my questions that she did not have answers to, or she didn't want to answer. So she took me down to the city library and took me into the adult section of the library. They literally had a little section in a little room of books that only adults could check out.
Right.
Like Lady Chatterley's Lover, or something like that. Right. But there were a whole bunch of the Kinsey studies were in there. And that was, this was been 1963. The Kinsey study has only been out less than 10 years. And so she let me pick any book I wanted except the Kinsey studies. I couldn't, because Kinsey was a communist, I couldn't read the communist. Yeah.
Of course.
So I took all these books down. I went home and I consumed them. I read hundreds and hundreds of pages. Now, remember, I'm just 12 or 13 years old. I'm not that old. I don't probably even have a good reading vocabulary, because there's a lot of words I didn't understand. But I quickly became the god of sex in my elementary and junior high school. Everybody came to me for questions about sex. And of course, I could, with some great authority, could sit here and pontificate about what that was or this was. And I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. I'd read all these books, and they were just clinical books that didn't tell you anything. And they were mostly wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd imbibed hundreds of pages of pretty much wrong information about human sexuality. If I could have gotten the Kinsey reports, though, in retrospect, I have read the Kinsey reports, and they're about 80 or 90% correct. I mean, there's some clearly wrong stuff about Kinsey, but by and large, I'd have been a lot better off if I just read those two books, the first two books by Kinsey, and not read any of the other books. I'd have been much better off.
Nah, Mom didn't want you to become a communist pervert.
Well, my grandmother saw a communist under every bed and in every closet. So that was more than being a Christian or a fundamentalist. They were anti-communists, and communism was because I was raised in the McCarthy area. Yeah. So you know about that, don't you, Mikey?
The Red Scare.
The Red Scare. It was crazy. But I went on to. I got my master's degree, and then I went on to get my doctorate degree, and that pushed me. I mean, practicing as a clinical psychologist, you see a lot of shit. You hear a lot of shit. You work on learning a lot of skills. Just so much. In my estimation, it took me 5 years after I finished my doctorate to feel like I really had earned my doctorate.
Sure.
There's so much you have to really learn in the real world. You can't study it out of a book. But one of those things I kept seeing over and over again was the role of sex in human trauma, the role of sex in religious. I didn't have a term for religious trauma. Nobody had that back then. But I kept seeing sex as a cycle that was happening to people. In the boys I was working with and the families I was doing therapy with, it was just a nonstop. It's like, how do I find a normal person here who hasn't been molested or abused or raped or and it was almost impossible. So that information kind of went to the back of my head that later came out in the two books that are behind me. But I really it really forced me to open my mind even farther about the damage. At that point in time, I was starting to realize the damage that religion does. Until that point, I'd still follow the Jesus is love kind of angle. And now I realize there's incredible trauma that happens to it. And then when getting divorced, I have to then discover who I am as a sexual being. Because I got married when I was 20. And who the fuck knows who they are when they're 20?
Man.
Nobody.
Nobody. So I spent 5 years exploring my own sexuality, and I had the opportunity to date some pretty religious women. For example, I dated a Mormon girl for a couple years. She wasn't a very serious Mormon, but her dad was like an elder in the church, and so we had to be on the QT. We had to be real quiet. Plus, she'd been divorced and she had 2 kids. But that was interesting. I learned a lot about the Mormon church from her. Even I would say she wasn't really a Mormon. She was just pretending because her dad was an elder. And then I dated this Catholic gal. She was an opera singer, beautiful, incredible voice, as you might know, professor. She was actually a professor as well. And we met each other, and we were fucking like bunny rabbits within a day or two. I mean, just having a blast. But it was mostly at my house. Remember, this is before cell phones. So I was in her neighborhood, and I just decided, well, I'll see if she's home. So I knocked on her door, and she was happy. She was happy to see me. It wasn't like, inappropriate or anything. He invites me in, and I go in. I'm looking around, and I look in her bedroom, and I see all these crucifixes and Bibles and Mary and Rosary. All this religious Catholic shit. I had been in her house before. I had never seen that stuff.
Ooh.
And I said, Gina, where'd all this come from? And she says, well, Darrel, if I know you're coming over, I take it down because I just can't come with Jesus watching me.
We're just gonna put you in this nice little handkerchief and put you in this sock drawer,
exactly.
and you go right in here, and we will see you later. But right now, you need to go away.
Yeah, I need to get the hell out of here. Anyway, there was a lot of those
Mama
kinds
needs
of
you
things
away.
that happened.
Wow.
And then I went into just practice of organizational psych for 20 plus years, and had a very successful, really good, enjoyed the career a lot, got to travel a lot. But then when Richard Dawkins wrote The God Delusion, when Sam Harris wrote The End of Faith, and I sat down and read all these people. I read Dennett. I had read, what's his name? The mathematician, English mathematician. I just read about him. No.
Feinstein.
No. I'll come back to it. Anyway, I've read all these guys, and I loved them. I loved everything they'd written, except I noticed none of them were looking at the psychology. And that made me think, damn, at that time I'd already written 2 books. My first 2 books were written in the field of organizational psychology. So I already knew how to write a book. I'd already published them. And I decided I've got something to say here that nobody else has said. And that's, the psychology of this stuff. Why does religion get in your head? And why is it so hard to get it out of your head? And that's what led me to write The God Virus. And the very writing of that book was a therapeutic activity, I guess you could say, because I got in touch with some of my own issues I didn't even know were there. And in researching it and understanding the psychology that I was trying to teach other people, I actually learned a lot myself. Any author worth the salt, if you're going to learn a lot more than you ever put into a book. The God Virus I learned 5 times more about the subject than I ever was able to put into that book.
People in the chat are throwing out Bertrand Russell. Is that who you're talking
Bertrand Russell. Thank you. Whoever that is, reward them.
Richard Mayhem and Stephanie Helms both.
All right. Thank you, Steph. Bertrand Russell, Why I Am Not a Christian. That book, I read that book.
I have that actually.
Good. Well, if you haven't read it, you need to. It's good.
Oh,
I would put it up against any of the others, but it was written, 30 years before. And I probably had read Bertrand Russell 5 years before before Dawkins published The God Delusion. So I'd already been primed by Bertrand Russell. Oh, a funny story, kind of on the side, was I went to England on kind of a vacation / book tour. And I had a speaking engagement at the South Street Ethical Society in London on a Sunday morning. I'd never been there before, but I was excited to be able to talk to one of the oldest secular groups in the world. I mean, I think they started like 1880 and they're continuously running. They had their own building, and it was nice. But anyway, I'm on the stage, sitting in the wings of the stage, and there's a guy out in front doing the announcements for the meeting that morning and telling people I'm the speaker for that day. And I've got a guy right next to me who's kind of like my handler for that day. And he looks at me and says, "Did you know that right there where Joe is standing, Bertrand Russell stood and lectured about 25 or 30 years ago?" And I got to go out there in 30 seconds to speak. I'm thinking, oh, fuck, what have I done here? So I have the distinction, Mikey and Neil, I have the distinction of having actually lectured at the same lectern that Bertrand Russell did. It's probably my only claim to fame there.
What a terrible thing to say to somebody. Is like, and that right there is where Jimi Hendrix did his last guitar solo. Now go ahead. It's like, what are you doing to me?
I know. It was very intimidating. I'll tell you. That was one of the more intimidating times in my whole career as a speaker. Well, oh gosh, where are we? And are we getting where we want to go?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about your founding of Recovering from Religion and the Secular Therapy Project. So, okay. How did you, or when and how sort of did you decide to to start something like that? I know you like to help people, and I figured that
Yeah.
probably plays into it, of course.
Well, I wrote the God Virus, and within it seemed like hours, certainly days after that book came out, I was getting emails and even phone calls from people saying I need help, and I couldn't possibly help everybody. So I put.
FYI, I'm listening to your God Virus right now.
Oh, well, good. See, that marks you as one of the more intelligent people on the planet if you're listening to one of my books.
Oh, I
don't have the hard copy yet, but I will.
Well, if you ever get the hard copy, let me know. I'll try to sign it for you if we're ever in the same spot together.
Well, I'll come down there camping, because if you run that campground,
come down there and camp in my guest bedroom or in my campground, either one if you want to.
Neil, I'm going to send you an extra copy. If you could just do the camping and get the signing done for me, that would be.
There you go. I'm happy to do that. And that signature will be worth 10 extra cents next year. I'm pretty sure. So I wrote that book, and all these people started calling me and emailing me, and I couldn't help them. So I thought, I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to just do a support group. So I announced it 2 weeks ahead of time on meetup.com. I just said, I'm going to do this support group. And it was going to be in the back room, kind of a little room in IHOP. I showed up that day, and 11 people were there. 11 people came to this meeting, and I only knew one of them. It was a guy known from one of the secular groups. So I've got all these people sitting around this table, and I just asked 2 questions. I say, how did religion hurt you, and how have you benefited from leaving? Mm-hmm. And 3 hours later, after tears and fits of anger and just all sorts of emotional expression that came out of these people.
No doubt.
The manager of the restaurant kicks us out, because he's closing the place. And at that moment, as I'm walking out of that room, I thought, damn, this is much bigger than I ever imagined. I saw the pain, the trauma, the shunning, the isolation, the depression. I saw it all in one single 3-hour meeting. And I'm very good at, I've done a lot of group therapy in my life. I've run many groups. I know how to manage a group. I know how to help people elicit safely their emotions and deal with them safely. So I wasn't trying to be a therapist. I really wasn't. I was just trying to be a support leader. Sure. And as a result of that, I thought, well, I could train other people to do what I just did. The skills are not that hard. There's just a few rules, and you stick to those rules, you'll be fine. Hold on a second. I may have could you guys, would it be all right if I excuse myself for 1 minute? I have a little emergency. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Sure. No problem. Wow. He came in here saying, oh, my story's not that big of a deal. And it turns out it's a lot bigger than I think he realizes.
Yes.
Especially a lot of the sexual stuff revolving around it. Because, I mean, him finding out about, ministers and stuff that were abusing kids and stuff, that's pretty horrifying. And we can now, all right, he's coming back. We can now understand where this trauma comes from. All right.
I have a little emergency. I didn't realize what happened while I was talking to you. All right, I think I'm good. Barb can take care of it. Okay. Where did we stop? Where did we leave off here?
You kind of threw me with the whole emergency thing, so I don't even remember.
I did too. Yeah. So that gave me the idea. Actually, the idea came from my publicist. I had a guy that was trying to help me get publicity for the book. He had said, why don't you start something like Recover from Religion? I think he was doing it more as a publicity stunt. But at the end of that meeting, I thought, this is not a publicity stunt. This is fucking real. And it's tough. And that's when Recover from Religion started. It literally started 13 years ago this month. It was April.
Wow.
April. I've even got the date. I think
happy anniversary.
Yeah, right. It was April 20th or something like that it started. We'll be celebrating our 13th anniversary. And then, so I just started bringing people together. I'm an organizational psychologist. Mm-hmm. and I know how to put an organization together. I guess I ought to. So I started putting an organization together. I started getting people involved that could help support the mission. I mean, it took about 5-6 years to really get it off the ground. I'm persistent. I don't take no for an answer. And I built a cadre of people who really were passionate about the same thing that I was. And after about 5 years, you know, how it's slow growth to begin with, and then it just took off. I even have graphs to show this. It's almost, it's not quite a hockey puck, but it sure did go up fast. Yeah, it's a pandemic. Yeah, I could talk about that as well. So that led to the original Recovery from Religion was the idea of having small support groups led by a trained volunteer. But then the idea of having a chat line and having a phone line, actually the next thing that came was a phone line, kind of like a suicide hotline, only for religious recovery. And then that led to the chat line issues, the idea. And it just, what we've seen over the course of the 13 years is an organic growth. As more people come in, as more people get trained, as more people catch the recovery from religion virus, if you will, they realize what this structure that we put together, this team we've got at Recovery from Religion, the structure we put together is built to help people. And there's no other structure like this on the planet. I mean, think about it. Every religion you call up is going to try and convert you to them. We have a kind of unofficial motto. Lots of religions, lots of groups will try to get you into religion. We're the only one that will help you out. And literally, I don't know of another group that effectively does what we do. And we do it with a passion for the mission of religious recovery. And we're very, very careful in our training of our volunteers. And not everybody who wants to volunteer for us gets to volunteer for us, because we don't let anybody touch a client until they've gone through about 8 hours of training. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to about that much time. And then going through the training isn't enough. You've got to also then demonstrate the skills, because we're dealing with people who could have experienced religious trauma, who could have been abused sexually. There's a lot of, we're not psychologists, and no, we're not training people to be psychologists, but we're training them in how to be good peer support and good listeners and not let their own agenda get involved. You know, we don't let people talk about their own. A lot of our clients will chat in and say, tell me about, did you have this experience? You know, and we'll say, we're not here to talk about us. We're here to talk about you. How can I help you? And that's the kind of answer you will get if you chat in. And we're just here to listen to you. And very few people in any religious environment have had the experience of having somebody just listen to them. Yeah. Compassionately listening to them without an agenda. That's rare.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's cathartic to have somebody just listen to you sometimes. So anyway, that's how that got started. And it's just been a slogging, long 13 years of constant. I mean, there's always something happening. We always got problems. We always got problems to solve. But what we have is a crack team of IT people that are just brilliant. They're geniuses. And we don't pay a dime. Nobody gets paid at Recovery from Religion except our executive director, Gail. But everybody else is a volunteer. This whole place runs on volunteer hours, including me. So
Gail's great.
She is. So as a result of that, we are able to help tens of thousands of people a year. And I'm not exaggerating. It is tens of thousands. And just on the chat line or phone line, we're helping 3,000 to 5,000 personally, one-on-one. And then if you add all the groups, we got groups from Sydney, Australia to Lithuania. We got groups all over North America and Canada. And each of those groups, if it has 5 or 6 people a week or a month, you know, that's thousands more people. So I know for a fact it's tens of thousands, and we're growing daily. Not long after that, 2 years after that, I started getting real concerned about the way therapy was going, with people trying to find a therapist. And that got me to investigating. I was trying to help people find therapists. I was giving some guidelines for how to find a therapist. And what I realized is about 2011, I realized that even I cannot find a therapist that I can guarantee is evidence-based and secular. I can't. You can look in the phone book. You can look online. You can look at Psychology Today. You cannot tell. So you could go to somebody 3 sessions and find out they're a fucking Catholic that thinks you should, go back and confess your sins or something
Rosary
stupid
and
like
Hail
that.
Marys or some shit.
Yeah, and I was getting that kind of complaint from people. So that led me to start founding the Secular Therapy Project. And I found a guy named Han Hills out of South Carolina to help me put the software together, because I am not a programmer. But he understood what I was trying to do. I was trying to create a system that looked a lot like Match.com. It's really a dating site. But the thing about dating sites is they keep both sides anonymous. The two people that are potentially going to date are anonymous until they get comfortable with each other. The same thing is true here, that the client can search for a therapist. The therapist can remain anonymous, but still, you still know what their skills are and what their location area and all. Because a therapist has to be careful in Macon, Georgia. If they were found out to be secular is like a curse word among Baptists.
Sure, yeah.
So you'd lose all your clients. The hospital would not refer to you. Judges wouldn't refer to you.
Yeah.
I mean, your referral sources would all dry up.
That's horrifying.
It is. And a minister might get up in the front of the pulpit and said, "Don't go to that therapist. They're a secular," and 2 people in the congregation are dealing with depression, and they stop going because their minister told them to.
Right.
So there was a real need for this system. And I started off with 24 therapists that I had personally contacted who would help me. And they joined the Secular Therapy Project. That was in 2012, May of 2012. So in May of this year, we'll be 10 years old. And May of 2012, I started with 24 therapists. And last I checked this morning, we have 587 therapists registered.
Fantastic.
Registered in 8 different countries. We're now international. 8 different countries.
That's amazing.
Have secular therapists. South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. We got 14 or 15 in Canada. We got them in England, Netherlands, Australia. I think I mentioned that. But yeah, so we've really grown. If you looked at the curve, we've got 28,000 clients. 28,000 people have registered as clients on the Secular Therapy Project. When you register as a client, you can do it anonymously. We're not tracking anybody or anything, but you register, and that allows you to get into our database and search for a therapist. And you can look down through all the therapists, and you can look at their specialties and, match your needs with the therapist close to you or a therapist that has the specialty you need. And it's working. It works beautifully. It's a beautiful system that Han initially helped me design. And then later, David Klinge, who's another programming genius, came along and really helped us upgrade it dramatically and even redesign the whole thing. And Dave did such a good job that we asked him to be on our board, and now he's a board member. Yeah, don't do too good a work, or we'll get.
I was about to say, be careful. Let that be a cautionary tale for everybody out there.
Yeah,
if you volunteer to help
what
out.
happened to him. He said he'd come and help me out for a bit, and then I'm like, no, you ain't going nowhere now.
Well, that's good.
Tale.
Well, you can't let a god like Mikey go.
Nope.
I told you before the program, Mikey's the god because he's the producer. So
yeah.
Oh, I gotta put my god voice on. Hold on.
I just keep inflating his fucking ego. Is all we're doing.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be insufferable in this after show.
I learned years ago to be sure and bullshit and butter up anybody that's in the back room, because they're the ones that really run the thing.
Words to live by, right there.
Okay, I've talked a whole bunch here. I'll probably hopefully
that's okay. We
too far off script.
No. That stuff I wanted to talk about. So definitely, I'm glad we were able to sneak that in at the end of the interview here, because just a reminder, all you guys out there in the chat or anyone who might tune into this after the fact, There are links below to both Recovering from Religion and the Secular Therapy Project, of course, if you are in need of something like that. So feel free to check them out. And I also have links for Dr. Ray as well down below if you actually might have a question for him as well. So feel free to check out Dr. Ray's stuff on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. But I think we're going to wrap this up, sir, and we're going to get into the after party. Now, you said you'll come in for a little bit because there may be folks in the chat that might have a question or two for you.
Yep, happy to.
So we'll do that shortly. We do take a little bit of a break in between the two, so we can bio break or refill your drink or grab a quick snack if you need to. So at about 6:30, we're going to get this thing going, guys, or close to that. So be sure to hit the link below for the after party if you want to check it out and just hang out in the chat. If you'd like to be involved in the after party, please let myself or Mikey know through one of the usual ways we do this, through Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And we'll give you a link and you can come and hop in here and meet Dr. Ray, who's I got to tell you, Dr. Ray, you're one of my heroes.
Well, okay.
Just so you know.
That sounds
just
dangerous.
Because of what you do, just because of what you do for people that really need something like that. And I think it's great what you do. And that's when Ethan told me to come and help out for the fundraiser. He didn't even get to finish the word fundraiser. I said, fuck, I'm there. I'm there. So
well, we appreciate the longer we've been around, the longer we come from religion and secular, the more recognition we get and support and donations. And we can just, people like you really help us grow and get in a financial position that we can really do this work. Yeah. So thanks for your help. Is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Is there by chance if people want to donate you and it's not fundraiser time, is there any?
Just go to the Recover from Religion page and hit the donate button. Recoverfromreligion.org, hit the donate button. And it really helps if you're a regular monthly donor. We really appreciate that because it lets us budget, because we are a very frugal organization. We don't pay our executive director very much to begin with, but we don't spend money if we don't have to. And we only budget off of our recurring donation kind of stuff, because we can't count on any big donor, giving us a bunch of money. So we only budget off that. So we have a very important and structured way of managing our money, which I think is important. If you're a charitable organization, you need to be accountable. And you can go to GuideStar and look at our platinum rating on GuideStar. We're rated as high as you can as a
That's
nonprofit.
Great. That's awesome.
All right, so we're taking a break and come back when?
I will send you another link in the same in Twitter there.
Okay.
But yeah, it'll be I'll probably send to you around 25 after, give or take, and then we'll get into it. We should have some folks in here by then too. Okay. Anyways, real quick, thank you guys out there in the chat for hanging out with us. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I certainly did. I've been waiting to talk with Dr. Ray for quite some time. It's finally happened, and I feel much better now. Also, thanks to my amazing patrons. You guys really are the lifeblood, no pun intended, the lifeblood of the show. I had a company called Lifeblood once, but not too many people knew that. Thank you for everything you guys do for the show. Also, all the other stuff that I'm involved with, like the Talk Heathens and stuff like that, and whatnot, is all linked below too if you want to check me out on some of those other channels. That's about it, and we'll get into the after party soon, so go hang out in the chat and wait for us. And like I always say at the end of these interviews, like the late great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.